This is a black widow, and it is one of the most dangerous arachnids on the planet, with a venom 15 times stronger than that of a rattlesnake. And this is the Brown Recluse, a spider equally dangerous to that of the black widow, equipped with a bite so destructive it has been known to rot human flesh. In this video, two of America's deadliest spiders come face to face, but only one will claim victory over the other. The idea started after finding a black widow in my backyard. This came as quite the surprise since I had never seen something so dangerous living so close to me. But little did I know, later that week I would find something just as perilous right next to me. You see, hidden in my bedsheets was a brown recluse. Yeah, I definitely need to move out after this one. Anyway, after encountering both spiders in such a close vicinity in the span of 1 week, it got me thinking, when these two arachnids cross paths, which one would have the advantage? Would the black widow with its superior webbing skills be able to hunt the brown recluse? Or would the recluse, equipped with its dominant speed, be able to gain the upper hand? Well, this was something I was willing to put to the test. But first, we needed to build some proper enclosures. Well, maybe not this proper, but we'll see what we could work with. Up first was the black widow, and in order to create this terrarium I was going to need an acrylic enclosure itself, a handful of sticks, some organic potting soil, and a little watering dish, just in case she got thirsty. And with everything put together, it was finally time for the big reveal. Yeah, like I said, nothing too proper or special, but it was important to have the fundamentals included, like this cross-section I'd created with the handful of sticks I'd collected. Having this laid out in an X formation was key for the black widow's web structure she was eventually going to create. Finally, it was time to introduce the black widow to her new enclosure. But as I lifted the lid off of the container, I saw something that would make my heart drop. The black widow was no longer alive. This came as a major surprise because not even 5 minutes earlier she was alive. Not only that, but she was active, moving around and busy creating those signature webs. So what exactly happened to this black widow? Well, I didn't really have an answer. As I went in to move her, I quickly stopped. In that moment, it occurred to me that this widow was far more intelligent than I had given her credit for, and this should be expected for an animal that has lived on this planet for 300 million years. This black widow was displaying one of its many defense mechanisms, thanatosis, which also means playing dead.
What the dog doing?
This became clear to me as I noticed she had released some sort of excrement to show how truly dead she was, and I couldn't help but think, what actually would have happened if I went in and moved her? Well, I think we'll just save that for another video, because it wouldn't be long till I found out the black widow's true capability in a moment I would truly never forget. After carefully placing the black widow in her enclosure, I immediately noticed she began to move again. This was a huge sigh of relief, but now it was time to move on to the brown recluse. For this enclosure, I went with a very standard setup of some leaves and cocoa fiber, all wrapped up in a plastic container. As you might have guessed, these spiders will pretty much live and thrive anywhere, and yes, including my bed.
Oh, hell no!
But typically you will find them in places such as basements and garages, preferring to hide in a cool, dark corner. And this is if you are finding them in your house. In the wild, they could usually be found hiding behind dead tree bark. Speaking of hiding, true to her name, the recluse was not going to give herself up so easily. That was until I spotted a pair of her legs sticking out from under this leaf. It was a good attempt, but not quite there yet. I decided to lift up the bark to reveal the recluse, showing off its main defensive posture. With all of her legs curled up, it was clear to me that she ultimately wanted to be left alone. I threw in an isopod as a small food source and left her alone for the time being. The day had finally come to put these two spiders to the test. But first, taking a look at the Black Widow enclosure, it was clear to me she was thriving. With a fascinating network of webbing attached to the sticks, nothing was going to make it out of her den alive. Which brings me to an important note. I felt that in order to properly simulate what an encounter between these two species would look like, I decided to have the Brown Recluse enter our Black Widow's enclosure. Rarely will you see a Black Widow hunting outside of its web structure, as they prefer to sit and wait for an unsuspecting prey item to become trapped in their web. The Brown Recluse, on the other hand, is much more of an active hunting spider. With its quick mobility, it would much rather pounce on an insect than rely on a web to capture its next meal. But now was the moment of truth. After removing the top half of the Black Widow enclosure, the Brown Recluse had crawled in. Immediately, the Brown Recluse began pulling on the Black Widow's web, alerting her that she was there and was aware of the Widow's presence. But the Black Widow would not budge. She had to be sure if this was a prey item or possibly a predator. This resulted in a standstill as the Recluse continued to search out the Widow, but again, the Widow would not move. As a couple hours went by, I finally noticed the Black Widow had changed her position. She had also added more webbing. This had to have been for a specific reason. She was preparing. And as the Recluse crawled up the glass, she had stepped in the web. There was no hope of getting out. The web was way too strong for even her. All she could do now was hope that the Widow had not noticed her. But that hope would be lost as the Widow had felt her presence. Something had been caught in her web and it was time to strike. As the Widow approached, the Recluse jumped. She now knew she was in danger, as the Black Widow had now turned around and began flinging fresh webbing all over the Recluse to ensure she could not escape. This was not looking good for the Brown Recluse. As the Widow continued to lay down her webbing, the Recluse had stopped moving, as if she had given up. The Widow had wasted no time covering the Recluse in layer after layer of silk, till her opponent looked less like a spider and more like a perfectly wrapped meal waiting to be served. And as she finished smothering her prey, she delivered a fatal bite. After letting the venom run its course, brutally turning the Recluse's organs to liquid, she could finally feast. And feast she did. The Recluse was no match for the Black Widow, as all that remained was a shallow husk. The next day, I decided to return the Black Widow into nature. She had proven her point that she will always be number one, and the Recluse will always be number two. If you guys enjoyed this video, then please consider subscribing. There are plenty more incredible creatures and behaviors waiting to be covered on this channel. And I'll see you guys in the next one.